Well, hello there, Dippers, and welcome back to episode 62 of the Knuckle Sammich podcast, the official MMA podcast of Sauce on the Side. On this July 4th, Dippers, I'm your host, Drake, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Thomas R. Shackelford.
You know, me and you discussed it a little bit. I really think the place to see the best fights is a little league baseball/softball field.
I grew up playing baseball. There was no fights in baseball, so it must be softball.
I'll tell you this. I'm just saying the park, the baseball park. You posed the question to me the other day. In the 3 years I have helped out with my daughter's baseball team, and by help out I mean tell everybody good job, strike out, they got tagged out, everything. I just say good job. I guarantee you I have seen as many near-fight scuffles as I have in all the years since I've helped coach. Actually coached wrestling.
15 years.
Since 2004, so 15 years. I have seen as many scuffles, near fights on the softball/baseball diamonds.
That is amazing. So, yes, every week I get the weekly Shackelford recap of his softball week. And every single time, there's a dad either that ends up in the dugout, there's a dad either screaming at another dad through the fence, and it seems like there's almost a fight every single week. So I asked you, I said, because, I coach wrestling as well, so I'd never really seen that many fights at a wrestling meet. You have your whack-a-loons here and there. So I posed the question, and you gave me a response, and I think, honestly, it has to be true.
Well, and I have a theory behind it. I think at a wrestling tournament, especially, a lot of them's usually directed towards the coach, or it's the coaches getting aggressive with the other coaches. Almost always. I think in wrestling, usually the dudes that can fuck you up, they're usually the quiet guys.
The nicest guys.
They're not going crazy. And it's usually the goofy guys that never wrestled or were really bad at wrestling that are now coaching or just throw their kid into it. Those are usually the only ones making a stink. And at a wrestling tournament, those guys kind of know the hierarchy of who's going to kick my ass. So
I was about to say that. They're
not going to say anything,
Yes.
I'm not a tough guy by any means, but the dad that's been working computer programming for the last 30 years of his life isn't going to come up to me and be like, you yelled at my kid, you asshole. It's just not going to happen.
No.
But out in the softball diamond, everybody's a tough guy. I think it's because the bats are around. Like, they think, well, I'll just grab that bat and whoop his ass, or something like that. Like, it's got to be something. Their fighting skills are highly exaggerated whenever their kid gets yelled at on a baseball diamond.
I love it. So, Mr. Shackelford, we have some fights to talk about. You're actually riding a hot streak. You're 7-1 in your last 8 picked fights, 3 underdog winners. So, before we get to any of that, latency, producer, you know what to do. Welcome to the Knuckle Sammich podcast with Thomas R. Shackelford, a Sauce on the Side production. All right, Mr. Shackelford, so we'll go ahead and run through the ESPN card they had last week, and you will also give your picks for UFC 239. Actually, a very good card to talk about. So, this last week, you went, I believe it was 4-1 on your picks, almost ran the table, with the exception of the Vince from Hell Pichel fight. So, we'll go ahead and start it off with the Francis Ngannou Jr. Dos Santos. Not really much to talk about as far as a fight. I think Francis Ngannou is probably is he Mike Tyson?
I think he is, because he has that. I don't want to say Junior Dos Santos looks scared. I'm not going to be a dick. But he got hit with one clean punch, and he turned his back and didn't really get hit with a clean punch after that and did not move. So it's almost Tyson-esque, where they're so scared of him that they just one grazing of a punch just.
Or maybe he hits that hard.
And same with Tyson. He does hit that hard, and that's how Tyson kind of got so feared. So when you hit so hard, and you scare former world champions into turning up into a shell, yeah, you're Tyson-esque.
Yeah.
And which is even weirder because after Tyson got beat that first time, it was like that went away and dudes actually started coming at him. Francis got murdered by Stipe and had that super weird fight with
Black Beast.
Derek Lewis, the Black Beast, and now he's almost made it back to that super scary guy again. I don't want to get punched by him.
No.
I'll tell you that right now. Someone on Twitter posed the question, like, would you let Francis punch you for an amount of money? I mean, now I would. Like, if it was $1 million, I'll take a punch, no problem. But, I mean, really, the answer is no. I do not want to get hit by that guy.
No. So, next up for Francis Ngannou, winner of Stipe and DC?
There's only one way I think that doesn't happen. Well, for one, I think DC's going to retire. I think, win or lose, he's retiring after this. I expect him to win. I think he'll go out on a win and retire. The one person that I think can throw a wrench in this, no matter the scenario, is John Jones. I think if John Jones says, hey, I want to bump up and be a double champ, then he is the only guy that will move Francis out of the way.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with that. I happen to want to see DC versus Francis. I don't know about Stipe versus Francis again. I feel like it's going to go the same way it did.
Well, but if DC retires, then you're going to have to do like an interim, or not. It wouldn't even be an interim. It would just be a new championship, and then you gotta go. You know, I guess if Stipe loses, then they might pull. Can you imagine a John Jones? I really think John Jones is not even the dark horse here. I think he's kind of controlling the division because he's talked about going up. If Stipe loses, I think you could easily get a John Jones versus Ngannou before you get a Stipe because it's hard to give him another title shot.
Coming off of a title shot loss. No, I absolutely agree with that. Which I think the John Jones Francis Ngannou fight would be a very interesting fight.
That'd be gnarly.
Yes.
I think John Jones has the height, the reach to keep him off of him, and the fight IQ to know where he needs to take it. I mean, Junior Dos Santos is a black belt on the ground. He's had some takedowns. That's where he beat up Tai Tuivasa. He could have went for a takedown, but he didn't. He's like, I'm going to go out there and throw hands with this guy.
Yeah.
Not a great idea.
No.
I mean, he just didn't have the fight IQ at the time to pull it off.
No, I agree. I think it'd be an absolute... I think that's the fight to make if DC does retire. John Jones, Francis Ngannou. So I think we had 2 title eliminators here. Next up, we have Joseph Benavidez finishing the fight against Jussier Formiga in the second round. Next up for the 125 title shot, Joseph Benavidez?
Yeah, it's got to be.
It has to be.
I think, and I even think when Cejudo gets back from his injury, that I think he'll have to fight Benavidez before Aljamain Sterling, who's looking like the 30. I think he'll defend the 25 before the 35.
Okay, so next up we have Damian Maia. Ended up beating Anthony Rocco Martin. Kind of held on in the third round. Dominated the fight in the first 2 rounds. Something interesting in this fight that I saw. So Damian Maia mounted him over and over in the first 2 rounds up against the cage, kind of, got wrist control and just kept punching him. Even though they weren't real significant strikes, they stood the fight up after he got mount against the cage. I thought that was really weird. Damian Maia was still able to hold on, win the fight, basically dodged a bullet. I kind of thought that third round could have easily went 10-8 and made this fight a draw. But
how?
With Damian Maia, I feel like the third round all he did was run.
He did. But a 10-8's like damage. Like, the guy didn't even punch him, I don't think.
I know, but I feel like...
Hold on. He won the first 2...
Easily.
Like, he was basically... If there was 10 minutes, he was probably mounted for 8 minutes.
One of the judges did score it a 10-8. They called it a draw because it was a majority decision.
There's no way. That guy did not... I don't know that he landed a punch on Damian Maia until, like... the last 10 seconds. There's no way that was a 10-8.
I was nervous.
He did run the whole time.
I was nervous.
But the Martin guy didn't really move forward, and all Maia did was kind of like just stand there and kind of circle away. Yeah. No, not a... had that fight ended up a draw, I would have phoned somebody at the commission and been like, "You're a dumb bastard."
Yeah, well, because I was actually worried about it. Whenever Damian Maya, after that third round, I'm like, man, I hope they don't score that at 10-8 just because he ran. Like the difference was that Martin was at least coming forward whenever in the other two rounds, even though he did probably take more damage than what Maya did in that third round. Just with the new scoring and the whole the push for the 10-8s, I was scared.
They need to work that out. I mean,
and they also don't need to stand anybody up after they get mounted.
No, I mean they probably should have stopped. Technically, if you can't defend yourself, they have to stop the fight.
Yes,
that guy couldn't get Damian. I mean, Damian Maya could have sat on him for a week, and that kid couldn't have got him off of him. Not a super exciting fight. If you're big into jiu-jitsu, it was fun because Damian Maya is he's like 41. You realize he's the second. He is in second place in most UFC wins.
That's crazy.
That Cowboy.
That's crazy.
They just keep booking him fights. He keeps taking dudes down. And he's actually said before he doesn't like to punch people. He doesn't like to hurt people. He just uses jiu-jitsu. And that's what he does. And we talked about last week, he's really only lost to one fighter. A guy that he can't take down that's not going to go overboard trying to punch him out, which was Woodley, Covington, and Newsman.
So, the same fighter, basically.
The dude's legitimately one of the best ever. He's just got one type of fighter that he can't beat. Unfortunately for him, those three guys are at the top of his division right now.
Right. So do you think Damian Maia is going to end up working himself back into a title shot there? Or
I don't think. I mean, Dana White's... They've seemed like they've moved into a space where you have to be really exciting to get that title shot now.
I agree.
Even on the Contender Series that they've been doing, they've had some guys get some really good wins on the Contender Series. There was one in particular.
Even the last one they had.
Yeah, the dude beat the diggity dog shit out of a guy for 3 rounds, and it was a very tough fight, but he was clearly winning. And then in the last 10 seconds, he kind of rocks the guy and then goes in for a takedown and slams him. And Dana White just came out and said, had he not went for a takedown, I would have signed him.
That's unbelievable.
And you've got to do something really exciting to get that title shot. And Damian Maia... It just ain't him. I think he's going to rack up a bunch of wins and go down as one of those guys that's the best to ever fight in MMA that didn't end up with a title.
Right. I absolutely agree with that. So the fight we lost, Roosevelt Roberts ends up losing a 3-round decision to Vince from Hell Pichel, one of an all-time nickname, first-team nickname, as a matter of fact. So basically I feel like he won this fight based off of what his nickname is. Basically, get in there, give you 3 rounds of hell. Roberts obviously won the first round pretty handily. I thought he was going to finish the fight at some points there. Ends up everything that he did in that first round just eventually did not work for the next 2 rounds, even though he continued to try the same strategy. So what did you see from Pichel in this fight that made him successful against Roberts?
Roosevelt, like you said, I thought he was going to get a finish in round 1 at some point. They go back to the corners, and Pichel's corner is just like, hey, man, he's getting tired. You're in this. You're fighting stupid. Fight this way. And he made the adjustments that they were telling him to make. It almost looked like... I think it was like an experience thing, and maybe this is the first time that Roosevelt has really went hard up against a guy that didn't wilt under the pressure. And I'm not saying that bad against anybody. That's just sometimes the pressure can just overtake you, and you get hurt, you get subbed, whatever. I think he pressured Pichel, and Pichel, being an old salty vet, didn't back down, and it almost maybe got a deer in the headlights look from Roosevelt, because then they were fighting for positions and he would clearly be stronger in the clinch, but then Pichel would turn around and get a takedown. And just little positions like that over and over just accumulated to where the end, it wasn't even really close in that 3rd round. 2nd round was closer. 3rd round was Pichel just pretty much taking over. So... Big win by Pichel, and the UFC loses another one of their insanely hot prospects to an old salty vet.
Yeah, you know what this kind of reminded me was the kind of like a Brian Barberena fight strategy. Basically, you take the damage early, and then you kind of just peck, and ultimately win the fight. I think that would be, honestly, a really fun fight to watch. Obviously, welterweight to lightweight, between Roberts and Barberena. But
I think we didn't talk about this. I think Barberena needs to go back down to lightweight. Did you see his last fight?
Yes,
he
I did.
was just too small.
I agree.
He couldn't break the reach on that guy. He eventually got TKO'd to a body shot.
Yes.
He's chubby at 170. Fun fighter. But I think if he went down to lightweight, man, him and Pichot would have a great fight.
I agree. I think that would be fun.
I'm glad
I think
you brought
even
him up because we didn't mention that last show.
I even think him versus Roosevelt Roberts would be an interesting matchup.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see if Roberts can fight a guy that's similar to Pichel, that'll take the damage and still try to push through it. And I think that would be another growing experience for Roosevelt Roberts, who is still, at the end of the day, a young fighter and needs that experience.
I guess the coaches know him best, but you and me, coaching wrestling, if we have a kid that goes up against a certain prototype of wrestler and they just can't seem to function that well against that person, before regional time, we always want them to hit a kid like that or that guy or bump up or bump down to wrestle that type, because if that's how we think, you want your guy to wrestle at his weakest point so he gets better at that. Now there's coaches that would run away from that.
Floyd Mayweather Sr.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess it really just is up to Roosevelt and his team, but I absolutely think you're right. Put him up against another guy with that same, not overwhelmingly great in any category, but isn't going to go away no matter what you throw at him. I think you're right. You give him a guy like Barberena, and he almost needs that. Because I'm not saying these guys are lower level, but if he ever wants to reach the peak, he has got to get over fighting that style of guy.
No, I absolutely agree there. So last fight we'll talk about here, Drew Dauber goes up against Marco Polo Reyes, and he looked awesome.
Yeah,
he looked awesome.
He was really looking awesome against Beneil Dariush, and just again, Dariush is another veteran. You could never count out some of these guys that are still young and athletic that are veterans in the game. Those dudes, they've got all that time and experience, and they still got the athletic ability left in the tank. Dariush tricked him. I always said that when I wrestled. I wasn't better than a lot of guys, but I tricked the shit out of a lot of guys. So I almost feel like that's how Dariush beat him. So Dober, he's back. I think it was good for him, because now he just jumps right back in there and just smashes another guy. And he's ready for that next tier again.
No, I agree. I'm really excited to see what Drew Dauber has next, because he looked awesome in that fight. So, Mr. Shackelford, let's see if this hot hand keeps riding. We're going to break down the UFC 239 card, give the pick, 7-1 in the last 8. Like I said earlier, 3 dog wins that you have picked. So, first on the card, we'll go ahead and work backwards in this one and then save the title shots for the last 2. We have Gilbert Melendez fighting Arnold Allen, who is a minus 375 favorite over Melendez, who is a plus 285. So we haven't seen Melendez all that much over the last 4 years in the UFC. I think he's only had 1 fight in the last 4, just a couple. Do you think that this is kind of like we had talked about just a week ago, how these older guys keep putting these tough young bucks with basically no real name against these big time old school vets like Melendez, because basically whenever we break down fights, we talk about all the time, oh, this guy trained with Gilbert Melendez. He is, in all accounts, a very, very big name for Arnold Allen. Who's going to win this fight? Is there any way that you see Gilbert Melendez defying the odds and winning this fight?
I am going to pick Melendez. But people forget Melendez was the Strikeforce champ, which at the time was one of the biggest. I mean, it was right there. They had a lot of very tough guys. He beat everybody that was the best in the world outside of the UFC. Shinya Aoki, all these guys that were.
A little side note: remember whenever Strikeforce had that Playboy Mansion?
Yes.
Fight card.
Yes.
So he was on it. Gilbert Melendez was.
I forgot about that.
Joe Diesel Riggs, he was on it, and he just fought 2 weeks ago. And also George Masvidal was also on that card.
Can you imagine a better fight venue?
No.
I would have retired that night.
Dude, I looked at the purses from that fight. I know Melendez cashed in like $30,000, and then Masvidal cashed in like $18,000, and Diesel Riggs also got a $20,000 payday.
And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but back then, that's a ton. That's a ton to a lot of guys that are fighting now.
Even now.
Yeah, to whoop somebody's ass, get $30,000, and then go hang out in the grotto for a day. I mean, that it don't get better than that.
No.
He was probably like, he's 37 now. He was probably like 25, 26 then. Like
he peaked.
That his life never got better. I mean, I hate to say that, but I am gonna pick Melendez. It sounds stupid. You look at his fight record. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. Listen to these people he lost to.
Oh, he's fought some tough guys.
Pettis. Decision to Alvarez, decision to Barboza, decision to Stevens. You remember was it the Stevens or Barboza where his legs swole up like a damn...
it was one of the two.
It was swole up as big as my head, his calf was. Melendez is still a badass. He's got very good 1-2 boxing. He can take a punch like no other. His grappling is insane. This Arnold Allen is a tough guy. He's 14-1. He's like 30 years the junior here. I know it's stupid, but I think Melendez comes in off a long layoff. That time was good for him. I think he gets the W.
Yeah, I like that pick, actually, especially as a dog, plus 285. That is very, very good odds, especially if Shackelford likes the dog there. So, guys, next up we have Diego Sanchez coming off of his win over Mickey Gall. He is a plus 265 dog to Michael Chiesa, who is a minus 350 favorite. Mr. Shackelford, does lightning strike twice for Mr. Diego Sanchez?
I'm going to put an asterisk on this one. I think Chiesa wins, but there's something scary here. Diego's crazy again.
Yes.
I don't think he ever stopped being crazy, but he was married for a little bit. He has since divorced because he wouldn't stop fighting. His wife wanted him to quit fighting. He said, "Fuck you, I'm fighting. This is me." Divorced her ass. He recently, within just the last couple of weeks, left Jackson Wink. Dude, they had this media scrum, and he is insane again. Like, he's back to the dude that was on The Ultimate Fighter doing yoga during the lightning tornado storm because he thought that the lightning gave him energy. He's back to that guy. And when you look at their fighting styles, Michael Chiesa is really just a young version of Diego Sanchez.
That's exactly what I thought.
I mean, he's not the greatest striker, but if he gets on you on the ground, he's like a wet blanket and you're not getting him off of you. I think Chiesa is young enough, has a little bit better striking, and really his size. He's much taller than Diego. I think he'll be able to keep Diego off and be able to get Diego in his positions as opposed to the other one. But Diego's talking about his new coach is this little Yoda-like guy that was like a Navy SEAL and has just like got him in this crazy mental space. This one's an asterisk because crazy Diego is scary. Like, it's that guy, if he gets on you, you're in trouble. So if this is one of those, I'm very confident in Chiesa, but there is just this streak in my head that's thinking this is actually a perfect fight for Diego. He's going to wear this kid out and just beat the shit out of him for 3 rounds after he gets tired. I don't think the Mickey Gall situation is going to happen again to Chiesa, though. Surely not. Surely it won't hit twice, like you said.
So next up, we actually have, is this Luke Rockhold's debut at light heavy?
205, yeah.
Yeah, so Luke Rockhold's debut at 205. He actually opens as a minus 230 favorite over Jan Blachowicz. We like to say Blachowicz because obviously we're from Illinois. He is a plus 180 favorite, or plus 180 underdog. So Mr. Shackelford, who do you like in this fight? John or Mr. Rockhold?
This is a sneaky tough fight.
It's a very tough fight.
Blachowicz did get KO'd by Santos, but he's still very tough. He was on like a 5-fight win streak before that. I am going to pick Rockhold. I'm hoping that Rockhold's troubles at 185 was due to the weight cut. Now, he did show some flaws. He suddenly became this boxer. Like, all of a sudden he wanted to box people, and he just left his right hand hanging down at his shins and didn't ever throw his left hand much. So he was just trying to right hook, and he was getting KO'd several times in a row from it. Hopefully he has learned from that and will keep his hands up and go back to his kicking and takedown grappling, which is what he's best at. He was always best when he was throwing these huge left body and head kicks, working into a grappling scenario. He was never a boxer when he was Strikeforce champ. Hopefully he's learned from that. The weight cut's not hard on him, and he gets a decision win here.
Yeah, I don't know what is going on with Luke Rockhold wanting to be a boxer, because, I mean, you were the face of Ralph Lauren cologne, man. Like, if you...
Hold on, he's a model for Ralph Lauren, not their cologne. Like, he's a legit model. He signed a legit modeling contract.
Yeah, I know, but he a lot of the stuff that he's modeling for is attached to the cologne. Okay. So I don't know why you'd want to be a boxer all of a sudden whenever, hey, your side gig, your side hustle is a model. Oh. That doesn't make any sense
I would
to me.
never get punched again.
No.
I would tell Dana, I only want to be in fights where people won't punch me.
Yes. I'd be signing Damian Maia fights like all day.
Yes.
Give me a guy who doesn't want to hurt me. So you like Rockhold in this fight?
I am going to take Rockhold. Yeah. I think he's going to get back to form, because really, for no reason at all, people are already calling for him versus John Jones.
Oh, wow.
They got that rivalry from AKA DC, you know what I mean? He's one of DC's good friends. So he's got that rivalry there. He's got a name. And I don't think they want to throw one of those young contenders against Jones yet. So I think if he gets a good solid win here, he's really in the running against the next John Jones fight. So I think he comes back.
Especially with the way that the 205 division's kind of
they got some tough guys, but they're all pretty young. You know, you got 4 or 5 tough guys, but they're all young. So instead of maybe feeding one of them to the shark, maybe give him another grudge match before that.
Yeah. So next up we have at welterweight. I kind of look at this as a title eliminator. You do the same?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we have George Masvidal, who is a plus 170 underdog, to Ben Askren, who is a minus 210 favorite. Mr. Shackelford, can Ben Askren pick up his second win in the UFC and potentially be the next guy up to fight Kamaru Usman?
I think he does. Masvidal is a very tough fighter. He just had the big win against Till. He's fought forever. He's got very good wins over a lot of guys. Good striking, solid grappler. But his weakness has always been getting taken down. Lorenz Larkin, Benson Henderson, Al Iaquinta, all of these guys took him down. Damian Maia, that fight was just brutal on takedowns. And Damian Maia doesn't have the greatest gas tank, and his takedowns are not as good as Askren. He's a better jiu-jitsu player, but Askren's much better at taking people down and holding them their wrestling style. So I'm going to pick Askren. I think he takes Masvidal down. I want to say maybe he gets a TKO referee stoppage, but I don't think Masvidal's grappling is that bad where he's going to get stuck in a position where he's just getting pounded on. So I'm going to go Askren by decision. I think he takes him down and really shows Askren what he's made of.
Yeah. As far as fights that I'm looking forward to, I think this is number 1 on this card.
Yeah, mine too. I mean, we're Askren fans. We're Askren fans, and I do really like Masvidal. Dude's had some great fights over the years. And you know, this is essentially a title eliminator, so he's going to be coming out there fighting his ass off. The problem is when he plants his feet and tries to land a big punch, Askren's going to be on him like a wet blanket.
You know what's actually really funny about this? Do you know who's actually a Ben Askren fan?
Who?
The guy who you would least expect to be a fan of the wrestler.
Is it LC?
LC.
The producer?
The producer.
How?
He asked me the other day, he said, "So are we a pro Askren podcast?" And I'm like, whoa. You know who Ben Askren is? And he's like, yeah. Latency loves his little, his like boom roasted, like the whole the whole media presence of Ben Askren, which kind of came out of left field.
Yeah,
so.
that's very surprising. He must have actually never seen him fight. The only fight he's seen is the Robbie Lawler one. Like, the 2 minutes of insanity. Yeah. He's like, this dude's amazing.
Yeah, no, I guarantee that's the only fight he's seen of him. So, last up, we have 2 title fights to talk about. First up, we have, both of these have very big odds on them. Amanda Nunes opens as a minus 400 favorite. She does hold the belt against Holly Holm, who is a plus 300 underdog. We've seen Holly Holm beat some of the best as an underdog. Mr. Shackelford, is there any way Holly Holm pulls this off yet again?
I am going to pick Holm. I am. Think of the Amanda Nunes fights that you've seen. Cyborg killed her. Rousey killed her. Miesha Tate killed her. Kat Zingano, this was early in her career. Kat actually beat her, but in the first round she was killing Kat. Now think of Valentina. You remember those fights?
Yes.
She threw everything but the kitchen sink at Valentina her second fight. Or the first fight, and gassed out, and Valentina beat the shit out of her in the third. Their next fight for the title, most people thought Valentina actually won.
Yes. Including us.
Holly Holm's a southpaw, which so is Valentina. And Valentina and Holly Holm fight a lot alike. They're a little bit more nitpicky strikes, counter strikes. I think Amanda Nunes is one of the ones that really needs someone to really come at her to show her best. Rocky Pennington, another one, just zombied forward, got slaughtered. I think this fight looks a lot like Valentina's, except for Holly Holm has seen the blueprint how to do it. So I think she's going to peck her way to a 5-round decision. I think with Greg Jackson and Winklejohn, them being master game planners, Holly Holm kind of rejuvenated in her career a little bit. Not that she was ever down, she just lost some really close fights. I think this just has all the makings of an upset. I don't want to pick Amanda Nunes just because she's the favorite. I think this is going to be a big upset.
Yeah, I actually like that pick a lot. I'm really looking forward to this fight. I think this is going to be a really, really good fight. And I actually do agree with you. When you see Nunes at her best, it's basically like when she's fighting female Forrest Griffins.
Yeah.
They're just running right at you.
Yes, and that's not my take on it. You look at all her fights in the UFC. The ones she's done really well in, people were coming right at her. The one, except for the Cat one. Cat, just ended up coming right at her and whipping her the last 2 rounds. But all her fights that she looks like the toughest girl in the world is when, you look at Cyborg, they just stood in the middle and threw hands until somebody fell. She just happened to hit more than Cyborg. Which also plays into it. She's got the 45-pound title. She's already talking about, beating Cyborg again and retiring and this and that. All Holly Holm's thinking about is winning that title back. I think this is just the makings of a big upset right here.
All right, so we have 2 underdogs that Shackelford has picked that the odds against them are plus 285 or greater. So last up, this is... So I'm going to explain to you why I think this is such a weird fight to make. So you have John Jones, who's a minus 700 favorite, over Thiago Santos, who's a plus 450 dog. Santos kind of just ran out of things to do at the 185 weight class, ends up moving up, and then he ends up beating Eric Anders, who really, after that fight, has not looked the best. He did get back on the win streak this last week.
Well, and Anders took that on about a week's notice, too.
Yes, and then he beats Jimmy Manawa, who has since retired because he's basically ran his course. And then he ends up picking up the win against John Blachowicz, which really, in my opinion, is his only really good win at this weight class, and that automatically propelled him to a title shot. I know we've seen John Jones as a big favorite before, but in my opinion, I don't think these odds are really that big for the discrepancy. in what these guys have done in their fighting.
You know, what did we talk about a little bit earlier? What's getting title shots right now?
Exciting fights.
Excitement. And Thiago Santos has never had a boring fight, and his last 4 have been insane KO wins. So that's how he got this fight. He punched his ticket by punching people's heads off. Now, in like 3 out of 4 of those fights, it was back and forth. He got rocked too.
Yes.
Anders, even the Manoa was back and forth. So, Jones is the obvious pick here. I thought if any of these guys had it, I've said it for a year. I've said it the whole time we've done this show. A guy that's going to beat Jones has to be his size, comparable in his size, because they can't just sit out. Those short guys cannot sit out at range and get front kicked the whole fight like Anthony Smith did. You know what I mean? The best way to fight John Jones is like DC did. Just Michael, Mike Tyson, not Michael. I almost said Michael Jordan. Mike Tyson, just square stance, bob and weave, throwing straight punches and get into his chest. DC showed it twice. Didn't work out for him even then. But that's the only way to get to Jones. The only way to get to him. You can't sit on the side and get pecked. Now, that's not Santos. Santos is leaping forward, throwing bombs until somebody falls. I thought this was a fun fight when they signed it. I thought, okay, Jones is probably going to win. He's going to be a giant favorite, but Santos is going to make it crazy. And that's what we thought about Anthony Smith. We saw what happened when he didn't make it crazy. He got picked apart and basically didn't have any offense for 5 rounds.
Thiago Santos won't do that, though.
I thought so. But in the leading up to all the videos and stuff they're doing, he's talking about being a sniper and not wasting energy and this and that.
No.
I'm like, okay, so you're going to sit out on the side with a guy with a foot. You will never get off a punch because he's going to front kick you and jab you to death. So Santos can make this a fight and can make it a competitive fight, and he could win if he connects a punch. But he cannot do it from any distance other than his head on John Jones's chest.
I agree.
I will go down saying that. Absolutely has the power and the balls to finish this fight and make it a good fight, but he cannot do it unless his head is resting on John Jones' chest the entire time, however long it lasts.
Yeah, I agree. Being a sniper is not how you beat John Jones.
No, especially when you're 5'11".
No.
With a regular 5'11" man's reach.
Yeah. So who's you think John Jones will win?
I think Jones wins by. Jones said in his interview, "I'm gonna strike with him for a minute, take him down, and finish him on the ground." I think that's how it goes.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a pretty easy fight for John Jones. Unfortunately, now if Santos runs out there immediately and just starts throwing bombs, I like his odds. I like his chance. Obviously, he has a puncher's chance. And this right here, this fight, is the definition of a puncher's chance. There's one way he can win. Yeah. One way. So, Mr. Shackelford, before we wrap this show up, is there any little news and notes? Obviously, John Lineker pulls out of a fight just a week ago. I was going to bring that
up. I didn't tell you via text message. That's how you communicated it to me. But I was looking into it a little bit. So I guess he's been like really vocal about how he had to go. You know, I just want you to think for a second. Think of the 35 and 25 pound weight classes. Who's the top 5 guys you think of? Lineker's in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
we even picked him last fight, and
we picked against We picked Sandahagen.
No. The fight that he got. Fight that he pulled out from. Yes.
Okay. But he's been very vocal with a bunch of media outlets about how he's had to take on basically a full-time job again because they won't get him fights because that whole 25, 35 pound division's being held up by Dillashaw, and now Cejudo's hurt. So he was very vocal about them not giving him fights and having to get a job just to pay for training camps, and he's in the premier fighting league, you know. Then they gave him his fight, and he got a cut on his head somewhere cutting weight. Probably much like Pat Cummins did. He probably passed out, conked his head, got a cut, had to pull out, and they let him go. So
that's a bummer.
He pissed somebody off. I think in this ESPN era, they're going to be a lot more tight on people because it's a lot easier just the ESPN cameras in there. You're kind of a big guy, just be like, hey, why the hell are you here? I have to work at McDonald's full time just to pay to even be here. So I think with stuff like that, they're going to be a lot more harsh on dudes. Looking at Lineker, though, he's got a name. He's still one of the best guys in the world. That he can go to one. I think this is good for him. Because in the UFC, he's just getting all these young gun guys that's, like Sandhagen. He didn't get hurt. He didn't get killed, but he lost. Now he can go to a 1FC, something like that. Eddie Alvarez and those guys are saying they're making a ton of money over there.
Yeah, this is a blessing in disguise.
It really is.
Especially for
really
1FC or one of those other promotions that's going to get a great
They're
fight.
probably licking their chops. Because I know I'll tune in. I've already been watching their stuff, but when they pick up guys like Lineker, who I like and who's a very fun fighter, I'll tune in for him anywhere he fights.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree there. So any other news and notes before we wrap this show up?
Nope, that's all we got.
All right, Dippers.
Hopefully LC gets us on the radio waves this time.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that done. Obviously, guys, big card this weekend. Be sure to check it out. And on that note, for Drake, for Mr. Shackelford, Dippers, as always, stay saucy.